Mayor Manel, I've got a conflict of interest. Items number 13, 14, 15, and 16 to do with consent to sever.
Okay, Chester, thank you. That's so noted. Next, the minutes from June 17th. Any errors or omissions? If not, mover and seconder for those minutes.
I'll move it.
Cerna, and who seconded it? Moore?
Second.
All in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. And the special meeting on June 28th. Any errors or omissions on those minutes? Seeing none, mover and seconder for those minutes, please.
I'll move it.
Moved by Widner, seconder Jaguar, all in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
yes,
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Next, we have a committee of adjustment. The applicant is Jacob and Margaretha Klassen and Herman Newdorf. Application number D13MV0521, located at Part Lot 21, Concession 9, the Village of Springfield. Mover and
Worship.
second, the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Malahide be called to order at 7:33. And that Dave Mennel be appointed chairperson of the Committee of Adjustment. Mover and seconder,
Move it.
moved by Moore, seconder
I'll second it.
Linsky, all in favor?
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
carried.
thank you. Jay, can you give us an overview of this application?
I can, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Good evening. Would you like me to put the sketch on the screen?
Sure, that would be an advantage.
Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Excuse me. So the application for minor variance tonight has been made by Jacob and Margarita Klassen, and the lands are owned by Jacob and Margarita Klassen and Herman Newdorf. I apologize if I've mispronounced anyone's names.
No, that's correct.
Thank you. The application for minor variance is to permit the construction of an accessory building for the purposes of containing an office, a man cave, storage, and woodworking. The business that's proposed to be situated within the accessory building as a home occupation is known locally as Bayham Construction. The lands, as the mayor had identified, known as Part Lot 21, Concession 9 in the Township of Malahide, located east side of Springfield Road, north of College Line in the Village of Springfield. Municipal address 11620 Springfield Road. The subject lands have an area of approximately 6,750 square meters, or about 1.7 acres in size, a frontage of 45 meters, approximately 148 feet on Springfield Road, and a depth of approximately 150 meters or 492 feet. Existing buildings on the subject property include an older two-story single detached dwelling and a storage container or shipping container, also referred to as a sea can. The uses on the subject property listed in the application for minor variance identify a residence and construction and woodworking. The lands were acquired by the current owners in August of 2020. The proposed building is proposed to be located to the rear of the existing dwelling, as outlined in yellow on your screen. Would comprise a one-story structure having a floor area of 269.8 square meters or 2,904 square feet. By comparison, the existing dwelling has a floor area of 125.7 square meters or just over 1,300 square feet. This represents an approximate increase of 114% of the size of the dwelling. So it's 114% larger than the size of the dwelling on the property. That'll be of importance as we go through the planning analysis. The adjacent lands are characterized by neighboring residential and agricultural development, primarily in the form of low and single detached unit dwellings situated on both sides of Springfield Road. And the existing residential lots in the vicinity of the subject lands vary considerably in both size and shape. The lands lie within the designated settlement area of Springfield, which in the County of Elgin official plan are designated Village of Springfield, the township in the Malahide official plan, pardon me. In addition, the parcel is designated residential and open space with a hazard constraint where it abuts a natural water course at the rear of the property. The lands are subsequently zoned Village 1 residential on Schedule D of the Township of Malahide zoning bylaw. Based on the application information supplied by the applicant, we have been advised that the owner of the property relocated his business from another site in a different township, and he has been operating his business on this site since he moved in 2020. It has been indicated that there is currently no manufacturing taking place on the lot, that the property is used as a storage yard for a small construction business, although it has been indicated that a woodworking component of the operation suggests that manufacturing in some form is part of the use. The owner has a number of company vehicles and trailers that are parked on the property. It is mentioned that previously has had 2 employees that come to the property in the mornings to pick up their vehicles and supplies, and then to go off to various job sites during the day for work, returning to the property in the evening to drop off vehicles and pick up personal vehicles to go home. The applicant has provided information to suggest the site is kept tidy and that he wants to build the shop so that he can store his materials and tools inside and keep the site looking neat. There is a shipping container on the property now and has advised the township that it will go once the shop is built. He has also mentioned previously that he wants to build a privacy fence down the property line to block the neighbor's view. He's also identified there's really only been formal complaints from the direct neighbor to the south. This was at the time of the authoring of this report, Mayor Mel. The township did receive one other complaint earlier in the year about the business and all of the other people running businesses in this stretch of Springfield Road. The other businesses include an eavesdropping business, a tree cutting business, and some transport trucks parked at properties within a few houses of this property. That's a summation of the information provided by the applicant. In terms of considering the application in the context of the planning policies and regulations, the provincial policy statement identifies that settlement areas shall be the focus of growth and development pursuant to section 1131. And in addition, the PPS states that appropriate development standards should be promoted, which facilitate intensification, redevelopment, and compact form, while avoiding or mitigating risks to public health and safety through section 1134. The County of Elgin official plan, again, the lands lie within the designated settlement area of Springfield, and detailed zoning matters along with minor variances are appropriately left in the hands of the local municipality for resolution. The Malahide official plan designates the subject land's village area on Schedule A1 and is further designated as residential. Applicable policies regarding the residential designation include the following: 4422. Land uses other than residential will be permitted in the residential designation if they serve the residential function, are compatible with it, or improve the quality of life in the neighborhood. All such non-residential uses should comply with the applicable regulations for the use as prescribed by the zoning bylaw. And examples of such uses include small-scale professional offices and public and private institutional uses, such as schools, churches, and government offices. Section 4423 states that home occupations may be permitted if they are clearly secondary to a residential use, are contained entirely within a dwelling unit, and comply with the standards and regulations as prescribed by the zoning bylaw. The extent to which the business Bayham construction as previously described serves or is compatible with the residential function has, in my opinion, not been demonstrated. The proposed contracting use would not appear to constitute a home occupation as described above, insofar as its location in an accessory building is proposed. With the accessory building being in excess of twice the size of the primary dwelling on the lot, the building cannot meet the test of being clearly accessory, secondary, and incidental to the main permitted residential use. As such, the conformity with the township official plan is not capable of being established based on these policy parameters. Further, in regard to the zoning bylaw number 18 of 22, the lands are zoned residential 1, or so, pardon me, village residential 1 in the township of Malahide zoning bylaw. The permitted uses in the VR1 zone include a single unit dwelling, a semi-detached dwelling, a converted dwelling, a bed and breakfast establishment, a home occupation use, and an accessory use. Important in considering these uses, as section 6.2.1 of the zoning bylaw establishes, the maximum floor area of an accessory building is 120 square meters. The floor area of the proposed accessory building is 269.8 square meters, which is in excess of twice the maximum allowable size in the zone. Home occupations are in fact permitted in the VR1 zone, but are subject to the following standards. Section 6.3.4. The following provisions shall apply to home occupations. Shall be permitted within a dwelling or within an accessory building. The extent to the floor area of the dwelling, including the basement area used for home occupation, shall not exceed 25% of the floor area of the dwelling or 40 square meters, whichever is the lesser. More importantly, as the application is for the home occupation to be used in an accessory building, C is the most appropriate. The floor area of an accessory building used for the home occupation shall not exceed 75 square meters, except in the rural residential zone. The character of the dwelling as a residence shall not change, or a nuisance, particularly in regard to noise, odor, traffic, or parking, shall not be created. E, mechanical equipment shall not be used, the operation of which would result in any noise, fumes, dust, or odors perceptible outside the dwelling or accessory building. And F, that the maximum number of persons engaged in the home occupation, but who reside on a lot other than the lot on which the home occupation is conducted, shall be limited to 1. Under the zoning bylaw, a contractor's yard or shop is included under the definition of home occupation. Nevertheless, such a use remains subject to the previously noted requirements. The proposed use would not be capable of satisfying subsection C insofar as it would exceed the minimum or the maximum 75 square meter floor area. No information has been provided through the application to show that the compatibility requirements of subsections D and E have been adequately addressed. And it also appears that multiple employees are engaged in the business, specifically contrary to the limit of 1 in subsection F. As a result, it is our recommendation, based on our analysis, the proposed minor variance to permit the construction of an accessory building to be used for the purposes of accommodating a contractor's yard or shop would not conform to the County of Elgin official plan, nor the Township of Malahide official plan, would not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. In our opinion, the proposed use cannot be considered minor in the circumstances and is not desirable for the appropriate use and development of the lands. Accordingly, it is our recommendation that the application for minor variance be denied. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Jay. Anything to add, Adam?
Nothing to add, but I can go through the correspondence that's been received to date.
That's a little further down.
Sure.
Mr. Klassen or Mr. Newdorf, do you have anything to add?
Yes, as a woodworking shop, it is not my desire to have a manufacturing facility at all. It is, the woodworking part is strictly a hobby. I grew up in it, so that's just something that I would like to be able to do my own too, just for our own use. Not that that is business related in any way. And as far as employees, at the moment, I have no employees. So some things have changed. But really, I just need it for storage, like it was mentioned, so I can keep things neat and tidy, keep things indoors.
Is that it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Diana, was there any comments received from circulating agencies and landowners?
Sure, your worship. I'm going to speak to the correspondence that's received, if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
So the first piece of correspondence the committee has in the agenda package tonight, it was from Kristen and Pete Weber. They live at 11610 Springfield Road, the property directly to the south abutting this property. I won't speak to their comments entirely, but they are opposed to the application. They speak to the CCAN next door, employees coming and going at all hours, waking the family up and coming onto their property from time to time, and transport trucks dropping off construction materials in the parking lot. So that information is in the agenda package, but we did receive additional correspondence after the posting of the agenda. So I'll speak to those, and I'll respectfully, if you don't mind, if I go through them in more detail, I'll read them as they were submitted. The second piece of correspondence was received on July 7th from Mark and Jocelyn Lambier. They're located at 11594 Springfield Road. And their comments are, and I'll quote their correspondence, with respect to the application for construction of a building at the subject property, they raised the following. First, the application states that the lot is occupied by an existing single detached dwelling and a storage container, quote unquote, CCAN. We would like to point out that this was not existing prior to the current owners, and I do not recall any request to locate said container being sent out to the surrounding residents. Not only is this an eyesore, a parking lot was constructed and several vehicles parked there on a daily basis by persons outside that residence. That alone has brought with it noise and bright lights in the winter months to the back of our home and our peace, serene backyard. The addition of yet additional business rather than residential structures onto the property would only further disrupt our lives here. There could potentially be vehicles coming and going all day, not to mention the accompanying noise of a woodworking shop. One expects neighbors to be out in their backyards and potentially seeing you in your backyard. One does not expect random strangers peering into your backyards, which could come from the proposed business activity. We do not understand how someone can purchase a residential property and then expect that they can turn it into a business property. That needs to be done prior to a sale. A hobby is one thing, a business is entirely different. Furthermore, we have medical conditions that prevent us from travel. We purchased our property because it was located in a serene environment. We put in a pool in our backyard, as this also our vacation spot. We cannot just get away for a rest. Our rest and relaxation comes from our primary dwelling. Would the owners at that location or anyone of the township think it would be acceptable to place a woodworking business next to your vacation spot? Again, I point out that this is a residential neighborhood and not commercial. This amendment would cause great disruption and consequences to our health and mental well-being, and I sincerely request that this not be approved. So that concludes their comments. The third piece of comments were received from Danielle and Mike Nolan. They reside at 11578 Springfield Road, and their comments were also received on July 7th. And they say, we are residents of 11578 Springfield Road, and we are writing in opposition to the application for the construction of a commercial building at the subject property. We are also opposed to the running of a commercial business on a property that is deemed residential. Shortly after the new owners moved in, the storage container, quote unquote, CCAN, was placed in the back of the property and has been not only an eyesore, but a cause of frequent traffic in the back of the property, which made us believe that a business was being run on a residential property. There has been what appears to be parking areas for employees at the front of the container. During the winter months, cars were left idling early morning while employees were going to work, parking on the property for the day. and in the evening while employees were warming up their cars to leave and to leave the parking lot. The result of this was bright car headlights shining into the back of our home. This left us feeling as though people were watching us during these times and violating our privacy. Prior to this, there was no vehicular traffic in the backyard of the residential property or any other residential property in the area. End of sentence. With the additional traffic to the back of the property and cars and equipment coming and going, there has also been a rise in noise pollution and vehicle pollution in what was a very quiet area. We are opposed to the running of a commercial business in a residential property, which appears to be what is currently happening. Opposed to a large container being stored on a residential property, and are strongly opposed to any further commercial structures being built. Adding a larger commercial structure would only add to noise, traffic, perhaps heavier machinery, and additional people having access to that property, and thereby disrupting our tranquil, park-like setting that has drawn us to reside at our current location. We choose our home on Springfield Road for various reasons, including the fact that all of the backyards are private, quiet, family-friendly, safe, relaxing, and backing onto farmland. Having a commercial business a few properties down would vastly disrupt our quality of life and sense of safety and privacy, and therefore we oppose the application. Lastly, we received comments this afternoon from Anita Mooney, and they write, Mike and I would like to address the minor variance application located at 11620 Springfield Road, Village of Springfield. Please note that the applicants Jacob and Margarita Klassen and Herman Neudorf have our full support to build a shop on their property. I personally would like to address a couple of issues mentioned in the letter from Mr. and Mrs. Weber. We live at 11600 Springfield Road, and that's 2 doors down from BAM Construction. From my view on my property, BAM property is always well kept. There's an 8 to 10 foot fence between BAM Construction and the Webers, so we do not see any mentioned garbage bin, etc. on BAM Construction's property. It is mentioned in their letter, they purchased the property to look out their windows and see farmland. I'm confused as they can't see BAM Construction's property unless truly making a point of going on the property line, and hence the 8 to 10 foot fence. It is also mentioned in their letter that they do not want to see a construction site. It is ironic because most of my visitors to my home think that the Webers are running a landscaping company. Drainage is also mentioned in the letter. I would be interested in knowing if it is okay to bury black drainage hoses under your lawn. Perhaps BAM Construction did the same as the Webers did a couple of years ago to help with drainage. Traffic to and from BAM Construction's house property is not an issue for us. When we do see their trucks, it is only for a few moments. I have never seen or heard their vehicles late in the evening. There are a lot of trucks and transports on Springfield Road, therefore it could be anyone's truck. I personally am getting tired of all their complaints and disrespect. My daughter worked as a municipal enforcement officer for Middlesex County. Her company car, clearly marked an enforcement vehicle, was parked in front of, and she writes, my own home for 2 days as she had 2 days off. The OPP were called with a complaint that the car was abandoned. We tore our deck down as we are getting a new one installed soon. My daughter and I put the wood to the side of our property for the time being. It was very disturbing to see our neighbor hiding and taking our picture. It is very creepy and very uncomfortable never knowing if your picture is being taken. I should be able to feel comfortable on my own property. All this being said, I truly hope BAM Construction is allowed to build the shop they need. After all, any company on our road are only trying to feed their families. It is time for some people to mind their own business and stop being bullies to other neighbors. And that concludes their correspondence today.
Okay,
And that's
thank you,
everything, Your
Adam.
Worship.
Mr.
Can I say
Friesen,
something?
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also the immediate neighbor to Jake and Margaret, BAM Construction. These neighbors are you cannot wish for better neighbors as far as that goes. I have not noticed their vehicles going back and forth. They're quiet. I keep on hearing from Adam saying commercial business, like I don't see how that isn't a commercial business when he gets in his own vehicle, pulling a trailer and goes to his job site. The job site is not at his place. The job site is probably Tilsonburg or St. Thomas. It's not here. It's, I have, Jake and Margaret have our full support on building the shop. I don't see 1.7 acres. I don't see what the problem is. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in attendance wish to make comments? Any questions from the committee members? Thank you. Jay, can you take your, that down? Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Okay, there is a recommendation from staff. I need a mover and seconder that the decision of the Committee of Adjustment that the provision of the village residential zone, residential VR1 zone restricts the maximum floor area to an accessory building to 120 square meters, and the maximum floor area of an accessory building uses a home occupation to 75 square meters. The minor variance application of Jacob and Marquita Klassen and Herman Newdorf relating to property located at Lot 21, Concession 9, known as 11620 Springfield Road, be denied for the following reasons. Proposed minor variance to permit the construction of an accessory building to be used for the purpose of accommodating a contractor's yard or shop would not conform to the County of Elgin's official plan and Township of Malahide's official plan. It would not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. Purpose use is not considered minor in the circumstances and is not desirable for the appropriate use and development of the lands. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendation?
Move it.
Moved by Lewis, seconder. Do we have a
Second.
seconder? Second by Jaguar. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes,
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. And Mr. Klassen and Mr. Newdorf, you may be aware, if you want to be notified of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment in respect to this application, you must submit a written request to the Committee of Adjustment. This will also entitle you to be advised of a possible local planning appeal tribunal hearing. And if a successful party, you should request a copy of the decision, since the Committee of Adjustment may be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal by the applicant or another member of the public. So just so you're aware of that. And I need a mover and seconder to the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Malahide be adjourned and council reconvene at 7:58. Mover and
I'll move it.
seconder. Moved by
Move it.
Lewis, seconder
Second.
by Moore. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members,
Good
of-
night.
have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to Rob Foster with the Graham Scott Inns. Rob, you have the floor.
All right, thank you very much. So I was going to go through the draft financial statements for the 2020 year. I believe you have it in your package, and I'll start with page 56, which is our independent auditor's report. And in our opinion, the municipal consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the municipality as at December 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations and its cash flow for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for public sector entities. So that is what we consider a clean audit opinion. No reservations, which would be consistent with what you would normally look for as a council. If these statements are approved tonight, we would date our report with tonight's date. If we move to your agenda, page 58, the statement of consolidated statement of financial position, so also known sometimes as the balance sheet. So these numbers are as at December 31st, 2020, with comparables for 2019. Normally I would I'll just go through and highlight some of the differences year over year. Cash being the first line at just under 5 million. That will fluctuate with the rest of the balance sheet. That's kind of where everything flows to. So it's no specific reasons, but that is up 1.4 million. On your investment side, see almost a $200,000, a little over $200,000 increase. That does relate to, these are at market value. So that was a good year in 2020 for your investments from a market growth standpoint. Taxes receivable, you can see a fairly dramatic decrease in over 2019. 2019 was actually the more odd year out. It had one particular property that was appealing and didn't pay their 2019 taxes until the appeal was complete. So the 1.5 million is a little more consistent with previous years. It is a little higher, just there is one property in there that we're waiting for another appeal to go one way or the other to determine whether there should be a write-off for that particular property, and it's noted in note 4. Accounts receivable, so the first was taxes receivable, so your regular accounts receivable up a little bit over the previous year. Some of that relates to HST recoverable. There was quite a number of projects done by the municipality in the year, and so as a result, you're recovering more, both paying and recovering more HST. Also, the timing of the payments from the water boards a little bit different than the previous year, which were recovered in January. So total assets then of 12.7 million financial assets. We did have the temporary advance, construction advance on the pier work at the 1.25 million. I believe that's been since converted into a debenture in 2021. Deferred revenues, obligatory reserve funds. So those are items such as development charges, building inspection, gas tax, development charges and building inspection reserves or funds are both up over the previous year. Your trade accounts payable, again, just a large number of transactions going on with projects. We're seeing those being paid in the following months. Pretty consistent though on a year-over-year basis. And no new long-term debt taken on. As I noted, it was temporary at the end of the year. So our long-term debt being down by the annual principal repayments. So net financial assets down slightly with the increase in the debt. Non-financial assets. So as you recall, we now are recording tangible capital assets owned by the municipality on the books. We had $3.7 million in additions, about 1.9 of that relating to the pier break wall. Constructions on Pressy Line. We also had a tender triaxle vehicle purchased in the year, some of the larger purchases. And in addition to that, when we get to the statement of operations, you'll see that there was $2.6 million in amortization booked in the year. So again, that's our best guess at how much those municipal assets were used up during the year. So total net assets then of 51 million. And that's 51 million is made up of both your accumulated surplus and the municipality has adopted, as I'd mentioned, to record the investments at fair market value. So we actually have $468,000 of what's considered unrealized gains. So those are gains on stocks that from when you have purchased them, but have not yet actually been sold to be realized, giving us the total of the 51,285,000. Our next page is the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. We'll note that there's both budgeted actual for 2020 as well as actual for 2019. The budget has been adapted to what we call a PSAB budget, so that it's had reserve transfers have been removed, capital expenditures have been capitalized, and amortization has been added to those budgeted numbers so that they're comparable with our PSAB actuals. And that's why you'll see that it doesn't come to zero like your normal operating budget would come to. On the property tax side of things, we did have a number of write-offs where we had farm properties that had been sold in the year. MPAC tends to automatically switch those then to residential. Then they make application to switch it back to farm-based. So that was about 150,000 in write-offs relating to that type of transaction. Taxes from other governments. There was one property that, as I noted, was under appeal, and that PIL is down slightly from previous years. Under user charges and license permits, we're down mostly in nice rentals, a little bit in water billing from budget. The federal funding is gas tax, so that will fluctuate up and down from budget depending on how much you're able to use towards capital projects. Penalties and interest down below budget. As you recall, there was a brief period during that early start to COVID where the municipality did not charge interest on arrears taxes. Total revenues then of 13.7 million. On the expense side, general government, so in anticipation of potential reassessments, we did increase the allowance approximately 100,000, which has been expensed through general government. Fire and police costs, and we'll see a number of different situations where COVID has had an impact. In this particular case, training costs. So there was basically no training allowed after the end of March. So we're seeing some of that as a reduction. Other protective services. So the Ontario government did ask that we basically break out the best we can COVID costs and put them under emergency services, which is then categorized under other protective services, was why we're seeing that number being up so much over the previous year. Transportation services, we had a nice decrease from budget there. Repairs and maintenance were down dramatically over budget, about 150,000, which was obviously great to see. As well, certain wages were able to be capitalized into like work that you did on your own for construction, as well as contracting for ditching, and some fuel costs down as well. Waterworks and sewer, so that's mostly secondary water boards that are consolidated into these financial statements that we're seeing the under budget in there. Recreation and cultural services, utilities, wages, cleaning, beach maintenance, again, a number of COVID related costs being reduced under that particular category. For planning and zoning, contracted services, the main reason for us being under budget there. And you'll see on the agricultural side, and this would be similar to local improvements, on the revenue side, that's where all our tile drainage costs go through. So the municipality is responsible for maintaining municipal drains and then recovering from the assessed landowners. And that's the two accounts that those would flow through. So our annual surplus on a PSAB basis being 712,000. Our next page is the change in the net financial assets. So again, keeping in mind net financial assets don't include tangible capital assets. So it's anytime we're adding debt that comes with our addition of capital assets, tangible capital assets, we by default reduce our net financial assets. So that's why we're seeing a decrease overall of 303,000 in that particular category. Our next page is just the continuity. As I mentioned, we do record those assets at fair market value for the investments, And so you added 148,000 of unrealized gains in the year. Our next page, statement of cash flows, takes us just from an accrual to a cash basis. So we generated about $4 million in cash before we started investing in tangible capital assets, roughly 3.7 in tangible capital assets, and we borrowed 1.2, showing with us overall then with a $1.2 million increase on the cash side of things. So the good news is we get to go a little faster now. We're now into the notes. There was no major changes in any of the accounting policies in the year, so we can move forward to all the way forward to our note 4, which is quite a ways down in the financial statements. And you will note, and I had mentioned earlier in the presentation, that we did increase our allowance by $100,000 in expectation of possible reassessments. Also note in note 6 that temporary $2.5 million was converted into a debenture in the 2021 year. Our next page is tangible capital assets page, note 7. Just continuity of the various categories broken down, and the next page is for the previous year. Note 8 is your long-term debt. So as I mentioned, no new long-term debt in the year, but we did have that conversion in 2021. Page 9 or note 9 is, I think, is an important note to focus on, because this does break down that $51 million accumulated surplus. Obviously, that is not all current related. For 46.8 million of that is invested in tangible capital assets, almost 8 million in the reserve. And we do have the long-term debt that we subtract off that to give us the just under 51 million. I think those were the main points I wanted to hit on for the financial statements. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you, Rob, for that presentation. I'm gathering any red flags. That's my perennial question.
No, you'll note one of the other letters that we've included for council to approve is what we call our audit findings letter. So our stamp on the financial statements is the financial related thing. Our letter on audited finding letter is for internal controls, how management cooperated, whether we found any sort of issues throughout the audit process. And you'll note that there were no issues, whether it be with testing of our internal controls, with cooperation from management, with any adjusting or journal entries being booked that we would ask for. Was a very clean audit. We thank management for helping us through another virtual audit, which these are not as much, and I'm sure you'll say no audit's fun, but virtual ones are even less fun than regular ones. So we do appreciate all of management's help through that process as well, and getting things done in a very timely basis.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Well, kudos to you, Arun.
Thank you.
Any questions from council? See none. Mover and seconder, the 2020 audited financial statement for the Corporation of Township of Malahide is prepared by Graham Scott Enns, presented by Auditor Rob Foster. Be approved as submitted, and that mayor be authorized to sign the audit finding letter from Graham Scott Enns dated July the 8th, 2021 on behalf of the Malahide Township Council. Mover and seconder, Jaguar and Lewis, all in favor.
Councillor Widner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. Thank you, Rob. Take
Thank you
care.
very much. Hopefully we'll get to see you next year in person.
Well, let's hope.
All right. We'll see you later.
All right. Next, we have a presentation by Benjamin on Community Fibre Company. This is in regard to broadband. I will say, Benjamin, we have, all the council has got the information before them and has studied it in depth. It is 59 pages, so we do have a limited amount of time. So if we could possibly limit this to about a 15-minute presentation, it would be much appreciated.
All right, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. I've got a few slides there to help along with the talking points. So I can share my screen here if everyone can.
Just turn your volume up a little bit, Benjamin, if you're hard to hear.
Is that a bit better?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. No, hit share screen here. So this is a high-level summary of sort of the trade-offs that are covered in the broadband report. As mentioned, it's a bit of a substantial document there. It started out with me going into Malahide Township back in February during after a bit of a lifting of some of the lockdown restrictions, which made it a bit of a difficult time to go through. But I drove the entire township around, had a look at what sort of infrastructure is out and around there across the entire place. High level things I found is it is very similar to a lot of the rural townships out here in Eastern Ontario, with the biggest difference being that Malahide's a lot flatter for the most part and is much more farmland compared to where I live out in Lanark Highlands, which is sort of very rocky, hilly and tree. But from a telecom perspective, the challenges are the same. Out here in Lanark County, we have problems with the existing incumbents are just not investing in the infrastructure out here in the rural areas. What they do is they target the high density locations, so small towns, hamlets, and even the bigger towns. They pick off the high density subscribers, do so primarily with cable and DSL. The wireless providers then go and try to fill in the gaps, and it makes for a very difficult business model for third-party providers to participate in. There also appear to be some interesting issues with how SWIFT funding is being applied in Malahide. That's just starting to come out now as the SWIFT app awards are going out. And there's also the question of what the Township of Malahide should do with the ICON application and the funds assigned for that. The ICON application, just to go and summary or recap for people, is that it's supposed to cover about 810 homes across several wireless towers for a cost in the ballpark of $682,000. It is important to note that the amount of money being spent for something like the ICON project is $842 per home for the 810 homes. However, it is my belief that you won't be able to get 810 homes onto a network built to those specs. So realistically, you're looking at spending over $1,600 a home for if you're lucky enough to go and get the first 405 homes lit up. Really what needs to be done is to basically follow through with the decision tree that I put in the report. The highest level decision is does the township want to go ahead with supporting a fiber solution or a wireless solution? They have different trade-offs, and the primary trade-off is that fiber is a long-term investment, whereas wireless is a short-term investment. Fiber has the fastest speeds available today, and wireless has limited speeds. Fiber has essentially unlimited capacity. Wireless has limited capacity that you have to go and pay people to go and upgrade radios on towers and potentially replace radios on every single home in order to increase capacity. Fiber is essentially future-proof. Fiber backbones are how the internet is built on and how the capacity for internet connections gets delivered around the world. Wireless is not that case. The downside is that fiber requires a very large upfront investment, but it's an asset that has a 30+ year lifespan. Wireless, on the other hand, you have a much smaller initial investment, but you have to keep investing in it every 3 to 5 years. You need to renew equipment, install additional access points, and you also will have to go and build new towers as network capacity requires upgrades over time. And the only ways to do that, because of limited wireless spectrum, is to put in new towers to make the number of homes served by every tower smaller. In terms of the wireless options, as I mentioned, capacity is spectrum and interference limited. Most small wireless ISPs operate using unlicensed spectrum, most typically in the 5 gigahertz frequencies. Those are the same frequencies that your in-home wireless equipment uses. And so as a consequence, when you are operating a wireless ISP in a densely populated area, like some of the housing clusters in Malahide around intersections, is you start running into problems where interference from the wireless signals within individual homes ends up interfering with the wireless for the wireless ISP network between the homes and the tower. Wireless has the downside of being expensive to operate. Throughout the winter, or throughout the summer, I know we've been getting a lot of thunderstorms up here in Lanark Highlands, and as a consequence for the 2 wireless links I have to go and maintain, we've already had to go and replace a number of power supplies and a couple of radios just because of lightning strikes. I also mentioned the interference issue earlier. In terms of wireless options that are discussed in the report, there are 3 options. One is essentially the option 1 in the report is actually the Malahide internal use only, and it's a bit cheaper than the Icon application. Within the Icon application is sort of the lower cost option in the $685,000 ballpark, and it's sort of characterized by using radios that are lower cost and lower cost towers. And it is my position that excuse me for a moment. Wireless assets built in the low cost option are essentially worthless in 2 to 5 years, mostly because with smaller towers, you run into the problem that you don't have enough spare capacity in order to go and perform the forklift upgrades that are required for improving wireless capacity. I touched upon that a bit with the tower loading calculations and such. And basically the newer radios that that provide more capacity by making use of essentially bigger antennas result in heavier wind loading for towers. And that ends up going and pushing up the cost of the tower and in some cases quite substantially. This is one issue that a lot of wireless ISPs, when they're starting out, don't really sort of plan for, because if you're just going and trying to provide service to clusters of 20 to 50 homes and you're trying to get it done for the lowest cost possible, you don't necessarily do as much planning for the future. The report also touched on the wireless links for Malahide internal use. And while they do provide cost savings, I think the number was around $1,280 per month for the township. A lot of those cost savings are inevitable as investment in fiber occurs if the township doesn't do it. And this is especially the case out here with Bell Canada. They are slowly but surely replacing their copper networks with fiber. Bell is doing it a lot more aggressively than Eastlink is for sure at present. But they keep telling their shareholders that as they replace copper with fiber, the cost of maintaining the copper goes down because maintaining fiber is a lot cheaper than it is with copper. Copper has a lot of reliability problems when it comes to aging cables because you get water in a copper cable and your phone line shorts out and you get that static on your phone line. Same thing doesn't really happen with fiber. Instead, the fiber cables are built with a lot more layers of protection for moisture. And more importantly, the fiber itself, even if it does get wet, The only time water in a fiber cable really causes a problem is if it significantly intrudes on the cable and it then freezes, which puts pressure on the fiber and attenuates the signal. But the way the cables are built, especially with gel-filled cables, that's very, very, very rare to go and see that happen. In terms of wireless option 3, which is listed here as sort of the medium cost choice for the township, the cost will more closely be to about $1.05 million. That's necessitated by building towers with additional spare capacity, going for the much bigger Trilon towers, as well as using the cambium radios that have more capacity within the same amount of spectrum. Even with that option, and especially given the traffic growth expected for internet over the course of the next 5 years, you will need to upgrade in 2 to 5 years in order to meet the demands of residents. And there's even the question of whether or not it will be a competitive option if Starlink is able to go and start delivering speeds of 100 megabits. Additionally, what's happening with a lot of wireless ISPs across Canada, and one of the folks I know over in Hawkesbury is certainly starting to do this as well, is that a lot of wireless ISPs are finding that they need to bring more fiber closer to their towers in order to get capacity to serve it. That is in part a consequence of the fact that wireless spectrum is limited. So any wireless spectrum you use for bringing data between your own towers takes away from the amount of spectrum you have available to service people who are served by the tower. And even when you go and start looking at this, you're going to start spending, even on the medium cost wireless solution, it ends up being about a cost of $10 per month per resident of Malahide when amortized over the more appropriate 5-year period for wireless assets. And this doesn't even include necessarily the install costs for each dwelling in Malahide that goes and gets connected to the network. When it comes to the fiber options, you have sort of 2 major ways of doing it. You can go aerial and put fiber up on poles, or you can bury it. Aerial has the advantage of being a lower capital expense to build. So the rough budget for Malahide Township, covering the 300 and some kilometers, works out to about $21.81 per month per dwelling. This represents 30-year amortization, and the general sort of assumption is that with fiber assets, because you have such a long lifespan, it is appropriate to amortize them out over 30 years. By making use of the Infrastructure Ontario program, you will be able to get a very low interest rate for those assets. Between aerial and buried, aerial has a higher operating cost because there are issues where you have to go and perform maintenance like pole replacement, as well as any pole repairs and fiber repairs due to accidents when you have a car or truck takes out a pole, or you've got trees that fall on poles, although that's fairly limited in Malahide. Aerial works out to about $16.5 million, or roughly about $5,229 per home. The downside of the aerial approach is that there would have to be a lot of new poles. Most of the poles that Hydro One has in Malahide, as I drove around, are old and small, and they basically, if you start attaching new telecom, because there is no telecom on most of the Hydro One poles in Malahide, you're going to incur a major cost to go and replace poles. So from a budgeting perspective, it is just easier and more cost effective to plan on building entirely new poles if the aerial option is selected. For burying fiber in the township, the recommended approach I would suggest is to make use of microduct, in part because Eastlink already has a lot of copper cables buried along the side of the roads in the more traditional location on the side of the ditch. With microduct, it's about a $26 million ballpark for construction, which works out to about $33 per dwelling per month across Malahide with the 30-year amortization. Benefits of buried facilities are lower operating costs. The only time you really have problems with buried facilities is when somebody is performing construction in an area and happens to dig into a cable after failing to do a locate. Cost is a bit higher at between $8,000 and $9,000 per home, and it has the benefit of aesthetics. One of the significant things you can do with microduct is it allows you to do things very incrementally. And one option for cost savings there is to do it incrementally using local labor that you buy the equipment for. I know on a lot of the roads, especially up in the northern part of the township where you have large farmland plots, it would be quite easy to go and rent or buy a vibratory plow and just run down the side of the roads at a very low cost for installation. When it comes to the longevity of fiber assets, they have a lot of value into the future, which wireless assets don't have. Expected lifespan of fiber assets is in excess of 30 years. Most of the cables are rated for 30 years, but even out around here where we have fiber running between towns, the cables have been in place now since the 1990s and are still in use. Benefit of fiber is that every generation of new electronics allows for incremental upgrades of the equipment on the end of the fiber. Without changing the fiber, you can essentially go and get speeds that are anywhere from 10 to 100 to 1,000 times the speeds of the equipment you had previously. And that equipment is growing in speeds every day. Like there's already fiber equipment now that does 400 gigabits down a single link on a fiber, just using one color of light, compared to one gigabit, which is starting to be common with a lot of the fiber at the home deployments. Any fiber assets that are built have significant resale value. There are two good examples here. Toronto Hydro Telecom, which the city of Toronto had started in order to get back in the late 1990s in order to provide dark fiber for businesses in downtown Toronto. In the depths of the financial crisis, they managed to sell their fiber assets to Cogeco in 2008 for about $200 million at basically a 9.6 times revenue multiplier. Ottawa, the same thing happened. The city sold off their municipal fiber assets for $63 million during the financial crisis. There's a lot of resale value for any fiber assets that are built. There are buyers, incumbent telecoms or competitive telecommunications companies will be interested in buying assets should the township build them and want to divest them. It's an unlimited last mile capacity. Your last mile is all glass, so it's dependent on the equipment that's on it. And any money spent on fiber is money well spent and has a long life ahead of it. As one of the speakers at the Rural Ontario Municipal Association meeting a year and a half ago in Toronto said, any investment in wireless merely delays investment in fiber. Fiber is the end game for telecommunications. There are quite a few other municipal broadband projects active across Canada and across the United States right now. Calgary, Alberta is actually running a 400-kilometer dark fiber open access dark fiber network primarily for businesses, because they found that the telecommunications firms operating there weren't being competitive enough for them. The town of Nelson in British Columbia, they have their own broad fiber to the home broadband network that they started back in 2014. Caledon is doing a bit of a different model. They've started collecting a broadband levy and are providing grants to providers to improve broadband to homes. Down in the United States, there's a cooperative of Western Massachusetts towns known as Wired West, who are working together to go and bring fiber to their homes. And one of the municipal network sites reports on cooperatives in the United States, and of the list of more than 100 cooperatives on the muninetworks.org website. Only 7 of the more than 100 cooperatives that are in flight have a wireless component. The rest are all fiber. Durham region is exploring the use of their Oshawa Power Utilities Corporation in order to go and deploy fiber to their rural residents. And here close to home for me, Lanark County is providing a low-income grant to homes of up to $2,000 per home to go and connect to better broadband. In terms of operating models, there are 2 models. One is to be a full internet service provider. The other is to be a wholesale last mile provider and allow other ISPs to build on top of a municipal network. Municipally operated ISPs will have a lower cost for residents, but higher initial operating costs. Approximate cost for residents for a gigabit fiber to the home, if it's under a municipal model, is about $40 per month. So basically less than the cost of a phone line from an incumbent telephone provider. Wholesale last mile providers have the benefit of lower operating costs, as those are supported and operating costs are handled by ISPs. It's friendly to competition in terms of local businesses that are acting as ISPs, but it has the downside that your cost is going to be anywhere from $60 to $90 per month or even more. ISPs have a tendency to mark up wholesale connections by at least 100 to 150%. So the summary is fiber is the long-term choice. Fiber has long-term value. Wireless has little value for over the 30-year time span. Capital expenditure, really, when it comes down to, is you're looking at the difference between spending $20 per month per resident versus spending $10 per month per resident for municipal services versus commercial, $40 a month versus anywhere from $90 to $150 per month. Any asset built has value for the township. A paved road has more value for residents than a dirt road does. That value is retained over time. It enables economic growth. As I mentioned in the report, even if you trigger or enable the building of just 350 new homes for the township, you'll more than recover the investment made in fiber, in property taxes. It increases values for residents, and broadband would become a solved problem for residents with fiber. I'm a strong believer in talking to your constituents and asking them what they would say. And if you ask them if they want to pay for $40 per month municipal gigabit fiber to the home versus what they're paying right now for their internet, it's in my belief a pretty easy choice. And I'll just sort of leave the decision tree there as a guide for folks about the choices that you have ahead of you and what some of the questions you need to ask and answer are. Question?
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Benjamin. A couple of things. Swift, I believe, now has indicated where they're putting fiber in the ground, and unfortunately, I was hoping that we might have a spine in Malahide that we could feed off, but I don't believe Dominique is on that committee. I don't believe there's any fiber going in the ground in Malahide, unfortunately. I think
there was one bit up on near Belmont. Somebody got a $6 million grant from Swift for a part around there, but I think that was the only part that really.
And that's in Central Elgin. That's not in Malahide.
Yeah.
And a second note, my understanding was that Ontario Hydro not only has the capital cost of putting it on, but they also charge a fee, do they not, for using their poles?
That is correct. Right now, the current pole rental rate from Hydro One is about $48 per pole per year. Up here in Ottawa, Hydro Ottawa is $53 per pole per year. Hydro One has been asking to increase that price. And especially if you go and look at some of the regulatory filings by some of the power associations, one that stuck out in my mind was out in British Columbia. It's really sad, but the electricity distributors, the local distribution companies, think that they shouldn't be made to cross-subsidize telecommunications assets. And it's sad because when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it's the same house that is being served by these assets. It's the same customer who pays for the telecom as pays for the electricity. So you really should make that cost the least possible cost for the consumer, even if it means cross-subsidizing telecom and electricity.
So is that operating cost, is that fixed in with your estimates?
That's why I recommended for Ariel that you put up your own poles across the entire township. Hydro One, the cost of replacing a pole with a single phase of power on it is about $1,500 if you're lucky and doesn't have much on it. When you start looking at 3-phase power on poles, you can start getting into $3,000 and $10,000 replacements for Hydro One poles. When for telecom, you just need a 30 or 35 foot class 4 or class 5 pole. You can buy the pole for about $300. And if you've got a crew of 1 or 2 people, they can go and put in 10 to 15 poles per day. So your cost is it's an order of magnitude less than dealing with Hydro One.
Okay, thanks, Benjamin. Council, anyone have any question for Benjamin? Dominique?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So 3 questions. First, I wanted to clarify, in your costing, does that include, I know we're talking about last mile, but does it include the actual connection from the road to the home, or is that connection left to the homeowner?
That would be included. So one of the big differences between wireless and fiber is that because a wireless asset is a much shorter term, lower value asset, you tend to have to put the full cost of installation onto the customer. So if the customer just needs a radio attached to their house, you're looking at maybe $200-300 to go and get somebody with a ladder and put an antenna mount on the house and point it at the tower. But if they've got a tree in front of their place, then they have to pay $1,500, $2,000, even $2,500. I know some of the folks out in Ferguson Falls here to get over the trees. With fiber, because it's a long-term asset, those costs of between typically around sort of $600 to $1,000 for install costs, you roll into the capital cost of building the network essentially. So you amortize the cost of installation out over the long term, because those drops will last a long time, and you expect to be able to retain the customer for a decade or more, as opposed to wireless, where it's not likely that you'll be able to retain them without additional changes within 2 to 5 years.
Okay. Because if I may, Mr. Mayor, because I know you calculated the number of kilometers in terms of roads, but many of the houses are very far from the road itself, and that could quickly add up to several additional kilometers. So I just wanted to check.
So the way Community Fiber has dealt with that here in Lanark County is we typically find most of the houses we have to bury a fiber drop, and it's typically like 95% of houses are within about 100 meters from the pole or the road back to the house. In cases where we have people with a driveway that's 800 meters, we just charge them the cost for the fiber. And if you're looking at drop fiber to go from a pole or the conduit at the edge of the road into the house, 800 meters, you charge them 50-60 cents a meter for that. And it's maybe an extra $200, $300 at most for the ones that are a lot further back. So it's not that bad from a bearability perspective, and we haven't had any complaints from the people who are that far back.
The follow-up, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Dominic.
Would the costing change if we went into a more hybrid model? Like, in other words, is this an all or nothing, calculation, or if we wanted to address specific spots and maybe mix it in with more short-term solution, would that affect the cost at all? Could we approach this on the selected areas and still look at the same costing per kilometer?
You can. It gets a bit challenging. The biggest problem with putting wireless assets mixed in with a fiber network is you still have to go and build towers and get power to those towers and all this stuff. Where fiber starts to save money for telecoms is the fact that the cable that you have running from your point of presence. And so what I suggested is that there be 2 points of presence, one in the north, one in the southern part of the township. And those are the only places you need equipment that has power, aside from at the customer home premises. That way you don't have all these extra added costs of equipment cabinets, equipment that has to be maintained, power that has to be brought to those cabinets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you start mixing it, though, those benefits of fiber networks go away. Yes, it gives you a slight advantage in terms of time of deployment, but deployment of fiber is a very scalable activity. If you want the construction to be done sooner, you can just hire more construction crews and get more people to go and be the boots on the ground installing the facilities. And you can spend the money on the wireless, but then you've got all the headache of the support of wireless. And there is one of the things I didn't really touch on in the report very much, but there's a big difference between how the business scales from 400 customers to 3,000 customers. At 300 to 400 customers for an internet service provider, you are just barely starting to break even and turn a profit. It is very difficult to carry the cost of your 2 or 3 support staff that you need at the minimum end when you only are spreading that cost over 300, 400 homes. When you scale that up by a factor of 10 to every dwelling within the township, it's the difference in night and day. If you look at the operating cost for a network, your operating cost for buying bandwidth is very low. Like you're looking at a few $1,000s per month for 10 gigabits worth of transit capacity that's transported into Malahide Township. You have a few options for how to get that connectivity into Malahide. And more importantly, even as traffic grows with internet traffic growth, you're looking at traffic increases of maybe $1 or $2 per home per month over every 5 to 10 years. So it scales very well once you reach that scale of the whole township.
So just a final comment, if I may, what would you say to critics who might look at your report and recommendations and look at your company being primarily a fiber company, as in its name, saying that it's right off the bat biased to a fiber solution? How would you answer that?
I will say that back in 2005, when I moved back to Lanark Highlands and had a need to go and get a high-speed internet connection at home, we're about 6 kilometers from the nearest Bell central office in McDonald's Corners. I set up and ran wireless links. I still have 2 wireless links that are high capacity in our network. They are a headache to maintain. It doesn't matter how well you build it. Weather happens, lightning happens, and it's just a complete pain. The wireless radios have been problems. Supporting them at customer locations has been problems. I had one house that usually 3 or 4 times in the summer I would have to go and replace the radio because they're on the crest of a hill and the lightning always hits. It doesn't matter how well you ground it or anything. You get a close enough lightning strike, the wireless gets fried. With the fiber network, even with, we currently have about 380 customers on our network. Yeah, I can go 2-3 weeks without a support call. The fiber just works so well. It's night and day compared to wireless or DSL or cable. You have so few problems with fiber. The value is there. It just try to run a network and see what you'll find. And yeah, it's night and day.
Right. So
Okay,
I will
thank you,
just
Benjamin.
add, just to say, just for as a means of feedback to your report, I will just say, with all due respect to your expertise, which is very thorough, and the report and the content and the numbers are very thorough, I will say that's not the most professional report that we've received, and I also don't believe is the timeliness certainly that I was expecting, or the standard that I was expecting when we go out and hire consultants. So something for you to consider perhaps for future clients. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other questions for Benjamin?
Let's have one if I could.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through to Benjamin. Benjamin, if we were to, if they wanted to go into, do it in stages. Fiber, is it limited by the size of the fiber, or is that once you have the fiber, it can handle as much as you put through it, or how does that work?
So there are a couple of ways of approaching that. The main thing you need to do is, if you're starting from scratch, is you need to build your points of presence. For Malahide, I would suggest start with a point of presence in the northern part of the township, because your closest location to competitive transport facilities is up on Belmont Road, or near Belmont is where Rogers has fiber going down through Belmont. Bell has fiber on that, is it Belmont Road on the northern part of the township? So you have a couple of choices there. So it would be build the points of presence, build the main lines that connect from that point of presence to your transport and transit facilities and along sort of the center of the township and on the edges. And then you can go and you can gradually fill in on all of the township roads that are between that. And this is where, if you went with buried facilities like with microduct, they have the advantage that you can blow additional fibers down when you're using microduct, so you don't have to put in all the fibers at once. But it's basically sort of build the trunk of the tree and then go and fill in all the branches that go out to all the leaves, which would be the homes.
Okay, so the wireless layer, the loom itself is full of fibers, individual fibers, and they can only carry so much. I guess I'm just trying to figure out how they work, but growth, I don't know how we could do that.
Yeah, so the way optical fibers work and the way you get additional capacity out of them, and this is what's used a lot on backbone connections, is that you can essentially go and light up multiple colors of light down the same fiber. So there are two kinds of technologies for that. One is called coarse wavelength division multiplexing. The other is dense wave division multiplexing. Coarse wave CWDM has 18 colors of lights. DWDM has 96. When it comes to fiber to the home, that's typically done using what's called a passive optical network. And you essentially go and use optical splitters out in the field so that you have one fiber going from the point of presence, and that one fiber usually feeds about 32 homes via a splitter out in the field. And it's because the speed of that individual connection on the fiber. A lot of the carriers right now are deploying GPON, so it has about 2.488 gigabits that are shared amongst the 32 subscribers. Current technology is already evolving into 10 gig or XGS PON that has about 10 gigabits of capacity that gets shared out and works a lot better for business connections. So you end up with each point of presence, you have a few dozen, well, typically around 144 fibers going into the points of presence, and then each one of those can fan out by 32 out in a passive equipment or splitter cabinet out in the field that doesn't require any power or anything. It's just essentially almost like a prism that goes and
Yeah.
splits the optical signal. And yeah, so that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Benjamin? Seeing none, thank you, Benjamin, for the presentation. You've certainly given council and staff a lot to think about going forward. But we will turn this over to staff and just get a recommendation from them going forward. So thank you again for your presentation. I think you're frozen. Okay.
Thanks.
I need a mover and second to the presentation from Benjamin LaHaye of Community Fibre Company regarding broadband for the township of Malahide be received.
Move it.
Lewis and Widner, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. Okay, moving on. Matt, are you doing the no parking area?
That's correct. So yes, good evening, Your Worship and Council. This staff report before you relates to parking complaints on Springfield Road received by council, which staff were directed to review. There are a number of houses south of the intersection of Springfield Road and Highway 3 near a local food truck who have provided reports of large vehicles, including transport trucks and RVs, parking along the roadside and blocking off driveways, making residents unable to enter or exit their respective driveways. So staff have reviewed the area in question as shown in the report and determined that in order to ensure that sight lines are maintained and residents are not impeded from the ability to enter and exit their driveways, it's recommended that no parking signage be posted on Springfield Road within 300 meters south of the Highway 3 intersection. The estimated expense to install this no parking signage was about $1,250. I would also like to note that such no parking area would not impact the delivery trucks to the commercial establishment in this area, as those delivery trucks are exempt from the no parking bylaw, considering the short duration of their activity. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Questions for Matt? Seeing none, mover and seconder, report number PW 2136 entitled No Parking Area Springfield Road be received, and municipal staff be authorized and directed to take the necessary action to implement no parking zones along both sides of Springfield Road from the intersection of Talbot Line to 300 meters south of such intersection.
I'll move it.
Moved by Cerna, seconder
Second it.
Lewis, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. Are you doing the next one or is Bob?
We have Bob with us this evening to give council the next update.
Okay, Bob, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I have the biannual drainage update report. The report is to provide council with an update on the status of the various drainage projects in the township. As you can see, there's quite a few on the list here. I've got 6 projects that were completed since the last report was brought forth. Those are completed. Last one was completed last week, the Heapley Dance Drain. I've also got 2 small changes to the report that didn't make it on the report here. The McGinnis Drain, we now have a report. I've got on my desk waiting to circulate that, so that should be coming to council in the next month or 2 maybe. And then the Tate Drain, as you know, was deferred back to the engineer for review. We haven't done anything with that one yet. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Questions for Bob on the drainage update? Seeing none, just on the Tate Drain, have we got a date for the interview on that drain?
No, I don't believe we have a date yet. I believe Mr. Donor asked for some time. He was involved with a farm accident, I believe, and he asked for some time. So we're sort of we've backed off a little bit and give him some time. So there's also the issue of the crops being, 6 feet tall now. So it's kind of hard to look at the lay of the land when you can't see the land. So we
Okay, well, we'll
have to push that off.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Questions for Bob? Seeing none, mover and second, report number PW 2137, entitled Drainage Update Report be received.
Move it.
I'll second
Moved by
it.
Moore, second by Glinski. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes.
That's carried.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
if I may, I would like to ask Bob a question.
Go ahead.
If that's okay. I don't think we related to the other stuff, but through you, Mr. Mayor, to Bob, you were talking about the McGinnis drain. Is that the one that goes through the Dixie Estates?
No, that's the Dixie Estates drain.
Okay.
The McGinnis is
I
the
know
one. Sorry.
we had a major rain event here a week or so ago, and it was a mess back there, to say the least. Apparently, there is a municipal drain that runs through there. The contractors that were doing something disconnected the drain or something. I don't know exactly the story, but all the residents from that point, the dividing line between Elmer and Malahide, from all the Malahide residents had water in the basement like they wouldn't believe, for the first time in like 30, 40, 50 years. And I don't know what's being looked at there. I don't know who's responsible for it, whether it's Elmer, whether it's Sifton's or us, whatever, but that's a problem that needs to get looked at right away.
All right. Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Cerna, that drain was, there was a petition to disconnect the drain at the property line for Sifton. That subdivision was designed by Sifton and dealt with through the town of Aylmer. The Township of Malahide was not involved with the design process, or we were not consulted with the design process. I believe the drain that they had left there was working. Okay, it's a 10-inch drain, clay tile from 50 years ago. So I believe the drain was working at the time. The problem is we had 4 inches of rain in 12 hours, and the surface water, obviously there was too much surface water. The surface water came over and had nowhere to go due to the activities on the private property there. So when you get 4 inches of rain, you're going to be beat every time. The drain can't handle. Drain is designed to handle 1 inch of rain in 24 hours. So I have no doubt the drain was working. It's just that the surface water was backed up and couldn't go anywhere. So the Sifton has been working, had come out and was contacted by the town of Aylmer, and they came out and looked at the issue and came to a conclusion, and then they took action to drain the water. So I believe now, the last I heard, they were looking for a more permanent solution there.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add, Bob, I believe there's an on-site meeting with the ratepayers around that drain and Sifton going forward.
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
Okay.
Apparently it's after July 21st. There's no date confirmed yet, so we shall see what they come up with.
Okay, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
All right, Adam, you're dealing with the next severance?
Yes, Your Worship. So this application is a severance, and our development coordinators put together a report. The subject lands are on Nova Scotia line. They have about 320 acres, and it's oddly configured. They've got some easterly lands, and then there's some intervening lands, and they're connected at the south end, as we can see on the report photo. And they're looking to split those two, the easterly from the westerly side, as a farm split. So the information is detailed in the report, and the recommendation is that Staff supports the application, and I did note that there's some existing topographical or physical constraints, and that if the existing dwelling is ever to be severed in the future on the easterly parcel, that may need to be looked at it or more scrutinized based on making sure that there's no landlocked parcels. So as far as that is concerned, staff is recommending approval. I'm able to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Adam. Questions for Adam on the Seabach severance? Seeing none, there's a recommendation. The mover and seconder, report number DS 2134, entitled Application for Consent Sever of Maryland and John Seabach be received. I think it's Marnie, as a matter of fact. Just so staff knows that it's not Maryland, it's Marnie. And that the application for consent to sever number D10E5321 is submitted by Marnie and John Seabach relating to the property located at lot 32, 33, 34, and 35. Concession 1, Geographic Township Malahide, known as 53367 Nova Scotia line, be supported for the reasons set out in this report, and the report be forwarded to the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration. Mover and seconder. Moved by Lewis, seconder.
I'll second it.
Cerna, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you. And in relation to the same severance, a mover and seconder, the Malahide Township has no objection to land severance number E5321 in the name of Marnie and John Seabach relating to the property located at part lot 32, 33, 34, and 35, concession 1, Geographic Township Malahide, subject to the following conditions, and there's 5 conditions. Mover and seconder for that. Moved by Lewis, seconder.
Sorry.
Who seconded?
Seconded. Galinsky.
Galinsky. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you. And Adam, the Goodhue severance?
Thank you. So this is a surplus farmhouse severance. Our development coordinators has put together a report, and there's some comments with regards to the proposal. It will require a revised assessment schedule in accordance with the Drainage Act. I do note that at 2.3 acres, it can likely be considered to exceed the appropriately sized criteria in the official plan. What we generally see with surplus farmhouse severances, and this is, as council is aware, to protect farmland, is that we generally see parcels being severed around the 1 acre, sometimes 1.5, depending. If we do look at the report photo on page 190, there's some trees that exist to the west of the dwelling proposed to remain with the severed dwelling lot. I've looked through some historical aerial photos. That area has been there. It hasn't been actively farmed as far back as the aerial photos go. There's no criteria in the official plan that determines what is appropriately sized, but I do know that this area has existed as part of the dwelling. So unless there's any questions from council on this, there's no further comments from staff. It's recommended that it be approved.
Okay. And I think common sense has to come into play as well. Questions for Adam? Seeing none. Mover and seconder, report number DS 2133, entitled Applicant for Consent, Margaret Goodhue, be received, and the application of consent to sever number D10E5421 submitted by Margaret Goodhue relating to the property located at the east part, lot 23, concession 12, Geographic Township of South Dorchester, known as 47148, with Ron McNeil line, be supported for the reasons set out in the report. And this report and recommendation conditions before the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration.
I'll move it.
Mover and seconder,
Second.
Move it.
did Moore and
I moved it, but I'll second it then.
Mark Widner, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
yes,
Deputy Mayor Jager,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. In regard to the same severance, the mover and seconder Malahide Township has no objection to the land severance E5421, the name of Margaret Goodhue, relating the property located at lot 23, concession 12, geographic township of South Dorchester, subject to the following conditions, and there's 8 conditions.
Move it.
Moved by Widner, second by Lewis, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jager,
yes.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. And Jess, you're going to excuse yourself?
I'm moving.
Okay, the next is a request by Chester and Alina Galinsky. Adam?
Thank you, Your Worship. So that there's actually 3 applications. There's 3 applications to sever 3 residential lots from the subject property. I was really looking for a reason to deny or recommend denying these applications, but as you can see in my report, there's really nothing concerning. They are within the settlement. They are within the settlement area of Mount Salem, so they meet the minimum lot area and lot frontage. There is a sliver of land that'll likely be needing to be conveyed to the county for road widening, but my recommendation to council is that it be approved. But if council deems it appropriate to deny them, that's council's decision to make.
You know how
We can
hard a
always do
decision
that.
that was?
Do we need a reason?
Not
I
really.
was trying to find one, I couldn't find one.
Any questions for Adam?
Oh,
Seeing none, mover and seconder, report number DS 2136, entitled Application for Consent to Sever of Chester and Alina Galinsky be received. Application for consent to sever number D10 E56 21, D10 E57 21, and D10 58 21, submitted by Chester and Alina Galinsky, related to the property located at North Park, Lot 23, Concession 3, Township Malahide, known as 51455 Colton Line. All be supported for the reasons set out in this report, and this report be recommended conditions for each of the applications before the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration.
I'll move it.
Mover,
I'll second it.
moved by Cerna, seconded by Widner, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jager,
Yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. And in conjunction with the above consent, mover and seconder Malahide Township has no objection to the land severance E5621 in the name of Chester and Alina Galinsky, relating the property located at lot 23, concession 3, geographic township Malahide, subject to the following conditions. And 56 has 10 conditions, E57 has 10 conditions, and E58 has 11 conditions. Is that 3 separate resolutions, Diana?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So under E5621, mover and seconder,
Move it.
Second it.
Moore and Lewis, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jager,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. And E5721, 10 conditions, mover and seconder,
I'll move it.
Galinsky and, or sorry, Cerna and Widner. I hadn't say Galinsky.
Better get that right.
All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jager,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
And finally, E5821, 11 conditions, mover and seconder.
Move it.
Jager,
Jager and Lewis, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jiguer,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
Can we call Chester back in?
Probably. Esther. We made him mad.
Maybe he went to bed.
Can you call him, Diana?
There he is.
There he is, I think. I see an elbow.
I'm here.
Okay, well, too bad, Chess. I stood up for you, but everybody wanted to deny it, so.
It was Dominique's idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
the
know.
one who told us.
Blame her. Okay, asset report card. Arun.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. This is the last of the year-end reports that I have today. Previously, we brought you some status reports on development charges, on the status of investments, and tonight we had the audited financial statements presented. And then this is the part which presents the status of our infrastructure at this point. So as you can see, most of the assets are doing well within the expected parameters. You'll notice that the very last one, the peer, has gone from an F to an A, which is obviously a very dramatic improvement because of the significant work that was undertaken last year. So overall, our assets, which, as you saw from the financial statements, roughly around $80 million in cost, are at their appropriate condition level and are being maintained or replaced as required or approved or directed by council on an ongoing basis. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Arun. Questions for Arun on the report card?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Rick.
If I may, through you, Mr. Mayor, who determines the things like I see our vehicles are C and our equipment is C? Who determines the whether it's good, bad, or whatever?
Right. So in some cases, it is based on certain legislated parameters where, for example, the roads or bridges have to be at a certain level of functionality. So there may be certain stipulated parameters, and most cases it is based on the condition or the age or the use of the asset. And so based on that, there is a scoring method which puts it in the A, B, or C, and so on category. And this was something that was developed a few years ago when the whole asset management plan was being developed. And we had the consultants working on all our assets and reviewing the conditions, and that's how it's being carried out.
All right, Rick.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Arun?
Yeah, I just had one on
Go ahead, Mark.
the C for the vehicles. There's no way it can be C because we just bought 3 new pickups. I mean, we got pretty good vehicles now, so what you're trying to say though, the way that this is judged is just some imaginary algorithm that somebody makes up without even looking at it, right? Nobody actually goes and looks at any of our inventory and says, wow, this thing's brand new. This thing's 2 years old.
No, it is reviewed annually. That's why we bring the report card to you annually, is because we update the asset register, we update the assets that we own, and all the information related to it is noted, and that then reflects in the rating of that asset. In the case of vehicles, for example, it may partly be because of the timing of the assets that have come in, and we still did have some older, larger vehicles that are being replaced in 2021. So there will be a further improvement that you will see in 2021.
Yeah, still pretty low though for having so many new ones. So It is what it is. I don't agree with that, so we can move on.
Any other questions from the room?
Mr. Mayor, I'm wondering, would it be possible to get a breakdown? So if C is an average of all of the equipment, would it be possible to get a rating of per vehicle so that we can see how you got to C? I think that's what I'm hearing is where it becomes questionable. Like, how can we have such, we know we've invested quite a bit in new equipment, but we still get a C.
Yes, we can certainly bring those details in a separate report to council if that's what council desires.
Okay, that would be interesting to know.
It would
Because
Thank
be.
obviously we must have some at A and some at E to get a C.
Exactly. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions from our room? Mover and seconder report number FIN 2109 until asset report card be received.
Move it.
Moore and Jagger, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jiguer,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes,
That's carried.
thank you.
Thank you.
And Adam, you're dealing with the next one?
Yes, Your Worship. So Gwen has put together a report on the expectation that hopefully our area and along with the province moves to stage 3 or phase 3 for opening. So Gwen's put together a report seeking direction from council on a return to office from remote working arrangements. And what the request is for those with children under 12 at home, if we are able to return to the office before the end of summer, before school begins, those staff members will have a challenge with regards to finding childcare. So the recommendation is for those that have those children under 12 that they are given some flexibility to continue working from home until the start of the new school year.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And I agree with the the implementation of putting staff back in office. Questions for Adam?
I just have one.
Go ahead.
If you go past that, it says it's recommended for staff members with children. Oh, hang on. Forget that. Go back in another one. Other staff members are requested to not return to the office until they are fully vaccinated. Unfortunately, this is difficult criteria to establish. It is inappropriate to ask if anyone is vaccinated or not. Now, to me, you can't have both. If you want to stay home until you're fully vaccinated, then you have to be able to somehow prove that. And the best way to do it is ask somebody or show it. But you can't say, I want to stay home until I'm fully vaccinated, and then nobody can find out. I don't agree with that at all. You want to stay home until you're fully vaccinated, then you come, and when you're fully vaccinated, you prove it.
Adam?
I believe what Gwen's speaking to in that sentence is that some staff members would feel more comfortable that those staff members who aren't fully vaccinated only come back after they're fully vaccinated. Some staff, I believe staff members are, along with the general population, following the vaccinations along with everyone else. So I don't quite know how to answer that question, Councillor Cerna, but I do think that based on the information I know is that there's no staff that haven't been getting the vaccinations, at least the administration office. But what Gwen is saying is there's no way to ask or demand that someone prove to us or to anybody that they've gotten both vaccinations.
Well, it just says other staff members have requested to not return to the office until they are fully vaccinated. It doesn't say their partner or there's somebody sitting 6 feet away. It's they want to be fully vaccinated, and yet you can't ask them. Again, you can't have it both ways.
Through your worship, I believe those staff members are openly and willingly able to advise ourselves that they've been vaccinated.
Well, they should be. If they want to lay out parameters as to when they can come back to work, then they have to follow a little bit of stuff. They can't just say, well, you can't ask me because it's inappropriate.
Any other questions for Adam?
Mr. Mayor, so if I may clarify then, so basically what we're saying is that once we get into phase 3, there are 2 reasons you may not return to work. One is if you have children under 12, the other is if you're not fully vaccinated. So it's fair to ask. So for each of our staff who will express the wish not to return in the office, it's fair to ask why. And they have 2 choices. One, because I'm not vaccinated, the other because I have children under 12. Is that the way it will be managed?
Through you, Your Worship, I believe that's what Gwen has stated in the report, but I do think that based on the information I've received, that there's no staff who aren't sort of following on with the general population with getting their second vaccine. I think the comments were based on the expectation that if they weren't able to get their second vaccine at the expected time, that it was going to be an issue, but I don't believe that it's actually becoming an issue.
So if I may, just a general comment, because the report also alludes to a future policy about remote work. And I want to make sure that as staff work on developing this policy, that we consider equally the wants and needs of staff and the wants and needs of our residents and our ratepayers. So it has to be a balanced approach. And the way it was worded, it was sort of skewed a little bit to, the needs of staff. And so I just want to make sure it may have just been an interpretation of the report, but as you consider it, we're going to have to find out if in fact the service levels are acceptable and if nothing's been noticed in terms of, decrease in service levels for some reason. So thank you.
Okay, and just food for thought, Terrace Lodge, for example, you can't force someone to have the vaccine, but they changed the policy that any new hires will be expected to have the vaccine.
And that is ministry directive. So they're fortunate in a way that they have it's based on a ministry directive, which municipal staff would not have that, but at least there's a precedent. You're right.
Yeah. Any other questions for Adam? Seeing none. Mover and second, report number HR 2116 entitled Post-COVID-19 Staff Return to Office be received. Municipal staff be provided with direction regarding the plan for staff to return to the office from remote working arrangements as outlined in this report.
Move it.
Moved by Lewis, seconder.
Second.
Second by Moore. All in favor?
Councillor Woodner,
Yes.
Councillor Moore,
Yes.
Councillor Cerna,
Yes.
Councillor Lewis,
Yes.
Councillor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes.
Mayor Mennel.
Yes.
That's carried.
Thank you. And Adam, you're dealing with the next one as well?
Yes, and yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is just a simple follow-up report for council's information. We're just seeking direction from council to allow staff to proceed with the request for proposals as approved by the province.
Questions for Adam? Mover and second, report number CAO 2110 entitled Follow-Up Report Municipal Modernization Program Intake 2 be received for information. Municipal staff be directed to proceed with the preparation and issuance of request for proposal for interested consultants to complete the facilities, consolidation, relocation, business plan project, development approval services business plan, and electronic processing project. Mover and seconder.
Move it.
Moved by Lewis, seconder.
Jaguar, I'll second. And I just have a question. Are there any timelines associated to this intake? Like, do you have to complete these projects by a certain time?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, I believe they're upcoming, so staff need to move quickly. I believe it's November that we have to have recommendations in place.
So that means the RFP, the selection, and the completion of the work, all of that needs to be done by November?
I believe so. I believe both are for November, and I believe Arundhati has some comments to add.
Yeah, if I may add, the funding that supports the facilities consolidation plan has a much shorter timeline. It is due recommendations. The independent third-party reviewers report is due by November 30th, which is why it is critical that we move quickly with the RFP process on that one. The other one for the development approvals process is we have a longer timeline. It goes into 2022. I believe it is much later into 2022, so it's a much more reasonable time frame to actually take care of that significant a project. Whereas this report, which is basically a report, not actual work or implementation, is expected by November 30th.
Okay, thank you.
And through you, Your Worship, that those dates were provided in the attached letter from the province.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Adam. We had a mover and seconder. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
Yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
We have two reports from outside boards. We got the Elgin Group Police Service Board and the Elmer Area and Water Supply. Minutes from March 10th. Any questions on them? None. Following reports from committees and outside boards were noted and filed. Mover and seconder.
Move it.
Winder.
Second
Seconder. Lewis. All in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna. Oh, Counselor Cerna. Counselor
Yes.
Lewis. Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky, Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
Thank you. Next, we have correspondence. We have 21 items. Anyone wish to make comments, support? Someone, are we supporting it already?
I have one.
Go ahead, Mark.
Item 10, the Township of Cochrane, a resolution requesting the federal and provincial governments include the PSA test for men in the national healthcare system at no charge. I think it's very important. It's a high level of cancer and could be, if it's detected early, there's a good survival rate, and I think it should be included. Thank you.
We can support that. Anything else?
I have one. There's
Go ahead,
we should support our neighbors about that bypass resolution that they're trying to ask the provincial government to waive.
What number is that, Rick?
I don't know. I think it's 15 or 16 or something like that.
16.
16.
Certainly, we can support it. The county has spent thousands of dollars trying to get that lifted with no results for the last 10 years, but it's not going to hurt to support it again.
No. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so suggested number 10 we're supporting, and 16 and the balance to be received and filed. Mover and seconder.
Move it.
Moore and Widner, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Jaguar,
yes.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
Okay, is there any other business? See none. Is there any bylaws, Adam? Adam?
No, Your Worship.
No bylaws? Okay, no closed session. So I need a mover and seconder. Bylaw number 2155 being a confirmatory bylaw, given a first, second, third reading, properly signed and sealed. I was good to you, Chester. Come on.
Come on.
Chairman, now, I mean,
Mover and seconder.
Move it.
Moore,
I'll second it.
Lewis, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
Oh,
Deputy Mayor Jiguer,
yes,
Mayor Mennel,
Yes.
that's carried.
And finally, council adjourns meeting at 9:35 to meet again on July 22nd, 21 at 7:30. Galinsky and Widner, all in favor?
Counselor Widner,
Yes.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Cerna,
Yes.
Counselor Lewis,
Yes.
Counselor Galinsky,
yes.
Deputy Mayor Jiguer,
yes.
Mayor Mennel,
Yes,
that's carried.
thank you. That's it, folks. Good night. Stay safe.
Good night. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Take care.
Take care.